Get 5 coffins ready.
Hey everyone, welcome to my guide for Newt, the latest hunter in SMITE who's viable both in mid lane and ADC roles, my preference being the mid lane. Newt is an aggressive attack speed focused hunter with low ability damage but solid CC and amazing built-in attack speed and basic attack damage. Build-wise, Newt can actually fit all roles, although she's new so that might just be new god syndrome. Power, crit, attack speed, her kit works with all of them, although I think the power build is the safest way to go since it gives you the most damage possible without being too easy to counter, i.e. Mid-Guardian or Horrific against the attack speed build and Spectral against the crit build. But again, seriously, just build whatever and it's good and you'll see why when we talk about her passive and first ability. Before that though, relics. Relics wise, well I think we all know the drill here, beads and Aegis almost every time. But, being so aggressive, blink over Aegis isn't such a bad call, although you absolutely want beads on Newt. Shard wise, of course, you have two options. When you feel like you're going to be under a lot of pressure from the enemy lane opponent, go Golden Shard. But when you think your lane will be the ones applying the pressure, go Wing Shard instead, for a better shot at a level 2 kill. So let's get into Newt's versatility by talking about her passive. Every time Newt hits an enemy god with an ability, she gains a stack of attack speed, and surprise surprise, Newt's abilities hit multiple times, each time they hit counting for a stack. Meaning that if you're aggressive, you can get very high amounts of attack speed simply by playing the character normally. This works perfectly with Newt's first ability. Newt charges her first ability by successfully landing basic attacks without the ability active. 4 successful basic attacks counts towards a stack of the ability, basic attacks against gods counting for 2 stacks. You know, towards the 1 stack. It's a little hard to word. But it's shown here clearly on the passive meter. Meaning she could stack the ability fully with 12 successful basic attacks on minions or 6 basic attacks against gods. So needless to say, you want to charge this ability up before you use it, but by god is it worth it. Upon activation, Newt enters a new stance, in which her basic attacks now pierce all enemies for reduced damage, and also deal damage on the sides of the ability as well. And of course, she can fire this stance once for free, then require stacks to continue firing, meaning she can have 5 shots total at full stacks. And plus, she can cancel the ability at any time and store the shots as stacks. But that one shot you got for free won't count towards those stacks. Now about these basic attacks themselves, they're absolutely insane for a multitude of reasons. For one, they can all crit, and secondly, they all proc item effects. Move over Izanami and Ram, Newt can actually apply things like Kins and Mannequin Scepter to all enemies it hits, not just the first one. And yes, this does work with Golden Shard too, so while this ability's clear is actually so good right now you don't really need Golden Shard, if you team this ability with Golden Shard, you have truly insane wave clear, as long as you know you can sit in front of the wave safely and slam it with basic attacks without getting punished. Now comes where the power build comes into play. The side projectiles are actually the same way. Unlike, for instance, the damage on Realm 1 or Mercury 1, this ability will... well, actually, I don't know Merc 1. Oh, shit. This ability will actually proc item effects, and also their damage scales with power. And in turn, since all the shots are technically individual ability hits, you gain massive passive attack speed stacks too while you fire. So with this ability, you either have piercing bonus damage crits or piercing bonus damage item procking basic attacks depending on what you want to build. This is naturally the core of Newt's damage, so stack this ability up and your passive up with your other abilities and unleash your nut. Okay, I'm trying not to make those nut jokes, but I guess to word it differently, unleash your mystical fury. There you go. There's a clean one. One of the best abilities to stack up your passive and get some free basic attacks in is with Newt's second ability. Newt deals damage in a wide circle AoE, dealing damage twice in the center and rooting all enemies inside that very center. And yes, of course it deals damage twice because it counts for 2 stacks of Newt's passive, so this is an easy way to hit a root, which gains you some attack speed, which means it also roots them so you can get some basic attacks in to stack your first ability. And if your first ability is already stacked, boom, they're rooted, so just slam your one on top of them. This being a root though obviously makes it a decent self-heal too, so never forget that when you're in a bad situation, you can just throw this at your feet while you're running away, or slap it right on top of a mean jungler as soon as they jump towards you. Generally though, this is an aggression tool to start for combos. Root, basics, 1, basics again. In case you haven't guessed, Newt's first ability is plenty in terms of wave clear, so don't go wasting this ability trying to smack it down the wave, other than during the very early stages of the match. How you play with this ability is actually a lot like Charybdis, where you simply CC a target with your 2, then shoot straight through the minion wave and onto your lane opponent for insane lane pressure, dealing damage to them while killing their wave at the same time. Fights are largely the same, but it's actually even easier. Since the ability more or less reaches past the enemy frontline, if you have an enemy tank in your face, but are in range to root an enemy backliner, and your teammates are willing to dive in for you, you can just beads right through any CC the enemy tank puts on you, slam this root on your intended target, then activate your one to start pumping out the damage, shooting straight through everybody. All this aggression sounds and looks like fun, but it can be dangerous clearly, and unfortunately, Newt's only true escape is her third ability. Newt teleports a very short distance in the direction she's currently traveling, and it's so short it's only able to go over player-made walls like Ymir or Thor wall. She can't pass over any of the current geometry in the game with this teleport, at least on the Conquest map. I mean, there's some edges of walls, but that doesn't really count. Let me just talk about the whole direction thing she's currently traveling in. All that means is she can go any of the 8 directions depending on what you're currently moving your character with, either using WASD on a keyboard or your left analog stick in your controller. So, darn, pretty lame dash here guys, but Oh. So when you dash, you unleash 3 projectiles around yourself that deal damage to enemies, prioritizing gods. Each projectile deals damage, duh, but it also slows, these slows stacking. So that's why the dash is so short, because it's basically an on-her pillar if you just cut out the middleman and deal a bunch of damage to the enemy and slow the enemy while boosting your own stats. And of course again, since it hits multiple times, it stacks up your passive for you. Even better though, using this ability resets your first ability's cooldown. So to reiterate, it's really not a get out of jail free card. This is an engagement / combo extension tool. And that I mean, obviously, 2, basics, 1, 3, 1, basics. Again, the 2 is perfect for giving those free shots as well as passive stacks, but it isn't strictly necessary. If you start off with a lot of stacks in your 1, you can simply 1, basic attacks, 3, 1, basic attacks, keeping in mind they're now slowed for your second onslaught. So that means you can 1 basic attacks, then cancel your 1 as soon as they get out of range of your basic attacks, saving your 1 stacks, then 3, gaining passive stacks in your 1 back, and now having them slowed so they have to take the rest of your first ability enhanced basic attacks. And of course, you can dash in any direction, so if you say you have a hyper-aggressive support like Ares and he gets a chain on the enemy ADC, you can dash away from the enemy support and towards the enemy ADC by dashing diagonally, ensuring all 3 projectiles hit the enemy ADC. That seems kind of like I'm grasping at straws to find technical plays, but luckily that works in Newt's favor. She's actually a very simple god to play despite how odd her abilities feel at first. This ability though, her 3, is still a dash, so even if it is tiny, you need to use it to skillfully dodge certain abilities, especially thin ones like a Thanatos Scythe or a Thor Hammer, or abilities like a Thor Ultimate right before they crash into you by side teleporting out of the ability's range. The ability does go far enough to skirt narrow abilities, and in terms of trying to survive while using this ability, this is the best way to use it. And naturally, if they don't really have thin abilities for you to sidestep, don't wait all day trying to get a sick outplay teleport. Teleport as soon as you can to try and get out of danger, and get the ability on cooldown so you can try and live. And don't forget about the slow too. The slow can actually give you just enough self-heal to live in certain situations. Again, just make sure to time the usage of the ability against any hard CC abilities, because if you slow them right before they completely lock you down anyways, like with a long-range stun like Thor or Fafnir, it will have been completely pointless. For another last-ditch effort of survival though, Newt also has her ultimate. Newt becomes CC immune and flies into the air, and can move around freely in the air for up to 3 seconds. And after the 3 seconds is up, Newt will return to the place you originally casted the ability at. So, you can use this ability to travel a great distance, but you still wind up back where you started. Okay, so not a great straight up escape, got it. While in the air, Newt can reactivate the ability to paste down a humongous circle AoE on the ground, which will deal medium damage upon the reactivation, then after a short delay, will pull all enemies to the center and deal very light damage. So first things first, you will not miss this ability if you target only one god with it. You can absolutely 100% lifetime guarantee hit multiple gods with this, but remember, the effectiveness of the pull is only as strong as where you can place that center of the AoE versus the most important target. So try to get some collateral damage if you can, but you should really be looking to snipe out one squishy backliner with this ability, a bit like her second ability in that regard. But I can say so far this ability has been a stellar finishing move when it comes to the laning phase. Using it as anything other than a finishing move when it comes to your 1v1s feels a little awkward, as all most hunters need to do is just save their CC immune ultimates and then cast them as soon as you paste this ability onto them. They know exactly where you'll land once the ultimate completes and slam the ult right in your face. The best example of this being with something like an on her ultimate. So generally, I prefer pressuring out enemies as hard as possible with their core kit, then bam, just as soon as they disengage, they not only take a bunch of unavoidable damage but also get pulled back to boot. A lot like Charybdis in the laning phase in this regard, if Charybdis had a usable ultimate. So what about later on in the match? Well, while you do return to your starting position, don't forget that this is actually a half-decent self-heal tool too. Just like her third ability, you use the CC as much as you use the movement of this ability. Say you get jumped on, you can ult immune the hard CC, then, while the enemy is still at your feet, splash the AoE on the ground and put the center away from your returning position, pulling enemies away from you upon you returning to the ground. And as well, don't forget 3 seconds is a solid amount of time too. For 3 seconds you're completely out of the fight, so you can use it to wait out things like Ymir or a Flash ultimate, or even a Thor or Thanatos ultimate if timed right. Really between her third and ultimate ability, Newt is all about adjusting yourself to use your limited self-peel exactly right to match the situation. Obviously, it's not flawless. The strategy I mentioned earlier of enemies simply using their own CC immune ultimates to destroy your face as soon as you land is still there, but it's absolutely something you should aim for, especially if the enemy team is greedy and underestimates how much space the pull can give if you placed it well. Otherwise, it's a pretty basic high-impact ultimate. If you're in a good position, as in, you know the enemy assassin and backliners can't quite get to you, and your teammates get a strong engage on the enemy backline, you shoot yourself into the air with this ability and just slap the AoE on the most important target. Usually the enemy ADC or mid laner. Whoever bore the brunt of your teammates' engage is generally who you want to slap this ultimate on top of. So in some situations, you're going to want to save it for self-peel, but other times when the enemy team is ill-equipped to dive you, simply use it as a safe, high-range follow-up to your teammate's CC, just like Nua's ultimate in that regard. Speaking of equipping, let's equip ourselves with some combos as Newt. 2, 1, basic attacks. 2, 2, 1, basic attacks, 3, 1, basic attacks, 2, 1, basic attacks, 3, 1, basic attacks, ultimate. At a distance, 3, 2, 1, basic attacks. Ult. 2, 1, basic attacks. 3, 1, basic attacks. For ability leveling, you want your 1 level 1, and don't forget to get at least 2 stacks on your 1 before firing it. Honestly, Newt's level 1 clear is terrible, but her 1-3-1 combo at level 2 is simply too strong to overlook in case your jungler comes over for a gank, so you don't want to get your 2 at level 1 instead. And as I just implied, get your 3 at level 2 and your 2 at level 3. From there, max your 1, your 3, then your 2. You can level the ult whenever you can for better burst to finish off kills, but so far I haven't really felt the impact of leveling it after level 5. Maybe max your 1, then your ult, then your 2. Maybe max your 1, then your 3, then your ult, then your 2. There's definitely some wiggle room here since the god is quite strong at the moment. That's one issue on making guides on brand new characters. They tend to be strong, so it's hard to boil down the characters to anything other than hit your abilities and the enemies will die. But when it comes to Newt, that will remain mostly true for her lifetime in Smite. She's a hyper-aggressive god that, yes, is overtuned a bit, but she should excel in 1v1s if she commits all of her abilities, because frankly she is really easy to kill. And every time I've gotten away with murder, so to speak, it's felt like it was just because people didn't know how to play against this god quite yet. CC immune her ult, save your CC or movement ability for when she slows you with her 3, and she's absolutely toast in any other situation other than a 1v1. She needs a lot of help in teamfights to make sure she can sit there and slam out her damage, since she doesn't have a way to power through things other than using her beads. Her ult is far too slow to match the burst of a late game crit or ability hunter, so she needs teammates around her to help enable her damage, speaking both in terms of keeping enemies in range with CC, and also peeling and defending Newt directly. So while her flaws won't feel impactful this very second, after a nerf or two, this character will start feeling much more volatile and difficult to play, outside of 1v1s. Your positioning will need to be perfect. You need to make sure you don't waste your 3 when there's an important ability you can avoid with it. And never ever forget you return to where you started with her ultimate, and everyone knows that. Sitting there in the sky hoping the enemy team's power goes out or something will only ensure a wasted use of that ultimate. But when things do go right for Newt and you judge which build is best suited for the situation, and you don't get too trigger happy with her 3 in fights, she is extremely oppressive to try and fight against. And getting enabled just a smidge by her support, whether that be by them CCing or peeling for the Newt, makes Newt feel completely unstoppable thanks to her abilities and basic attacks alike, reaching straight past the enemy frontline to smack dab on the enemy's backline's face. That's all I have on Newt for now, thanks for watching.